The recent South African general elections have led to an important question about Julius Malema and his political party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, failure at the polls. Did the open border policy lead to his failure? Let us look at the man himself and his political philosophy. Julius Malema is a South African politician and an activist who has been a prominent figure in the country's political landscape since the early 2000s. He was born on March 3rd, 1981 in Seshego, Limpopo province in South Africa. Malema grew up in a poor household and was raised by his single mother, a domestic worker. Not unlike most of his peers at the time. He attended Seshego High School and later on studied a degree in political science and African politics as a mature student. Malema is a married man and has 2 children. Julius Malema's political journey commenced at a remarkably young age, joining the Masaputsela Trailblazers. In other words, a movement affiliated with the African National Congress, ANC. At just 9 years old, Malema engaged in activities such as removing National Party posters outside police stations. His leadership skills and charisma shone brightly even at such a young age. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the League's provincial chairperson in Limpopo and later its national president. So Malema's trajectory has always been on the up, and he's always been a crowd puller as well as a controversial figure from early on. So let us look at some of his controversies that have defined his career. Malema was famously outspoken in his support of ANC Deputy President at the time, Jacob Zuma, who would later on become president of the ANC as well as of South Africa. His expressions of support, saying he would kill for Zuma, drew considerable criticism, as did his publicly singing an ANC liberation song that included some controversial lyrics, held by many to be racially charged and having the potential to incite violence. But he continued to sing the song, and he would later be convicted by a South African court in 2011 for doing so, with the song cited as hate speech. These incidences continued. In March 2010, he was convicted of having used hate speech again with regard to comments he made about a woman who had accused Zuma of sexual assault in 2006. And in April 2010, the string of incidences continued, ranging from Malema's public support of Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe and his equally public disparagement of Mugabe's rival Morgan Tsvangirai at a time when Zuma was trying to mediate between the two men, to Malema's verbal altercation with and ousting of a journalist from a press conference. All this drew rebukes from ANC and in particular Jacob Zuma. Malema, disappointed in Zuma's rebuke, he turned on him. This is a leader whom he had staunchly defended, and instead he began to criticize him in public. So it seems you do not want to get on the wrong side of Malema. So Malema was ultimately called to an ANC disciplinary hearing in May 2010. The terms of a pre-bargain agreement required him to publicly apologize for his behavior and made him subject to suspension from the party should he engage in similar behavior within the next 2 years. In 2011, however, he called for the government of Botswana to be overthrown and continuously criticized President Jacob Zuma. So he never stopped and defied those orders to behave. He was finally expelled from the ANC in 2012. Malema's suspension from the ANC and his subsequent expulsion caused many analysts to conclude that it was the end of his political career, as he was dependent on the tradition and the history of the ANC to support his agenda, and being excluded from the ANC would mean that he was very, very much isolated. This would not prove to be the case, as Malema and Shivambu, who was also suspended for 3 years, vowed to continue their fight against the inability of the government, in other words the ANC, to establish domestic and international policies beneficial to the development of South Africa. In 2013, Malema founded the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, in which he would be the commander-in-chief. So what was the philosophy of EFF? So this is a leftist political party, anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist movement that aims to address issues of economic inequality, land reform, and social justice. So to sum it all up, the policy is Marxist-Leninist, calling for seizure of private property and nationalization of the country's gold mines, banking institutions, and other industries. Malema had declared his plans to destroy South African capitalism and turn the country into Cuba, which he describes as a successful socialist state. Malema believes in Marxism-Leninism theory that involves a two-stage communist revolution which is needed to repress capitalism. So you have a vanguard party, which EFF, some people would interpret it to be, in that position to pave the way for an eventual communist society that would be classless and stateless. Julius Malema looks at countries such as China, Cuba, Laos, and Vietnam, also other political parties which are led by this sort of philosophy. Malema has been critical of Western imperialism and has called for closer ties with countries such as China and Russia, who practice some form of communism. He has also been a vocal supporter of the Palestinian cause. To explain communism, it goes beyond the scope of this video. So let us move on with land reform and expropriation, which is a contentious issue in South Africa. Malema has been a vocal advocate for land reform and expropriation without compensation. He has called for the distribution of land from white owners to black South Africans, arguing that this is necessary to address historical injustices and promote economic equality. Malema has also emphasized the need for economic empowerment, arguing that the South African economy must be transformed to benefit the majority of the population rather than just a small elite. He has called for the nationalization of key industries and the creation of state-owned enterprises to drive economic development, as stated earlier on. When the party EFF was first formed, it gained significant support among young South Africans and became a major force in the country's political landscape. In its first participation in elections in 2014, the new party won about 6% of the national vote, enough to give Malema and 24 other EFF colleagues seats in the 400-seat National Assembly. It also performed well in the 2019 elections, winning almost 11% of the national vote. The party's number of seats in the National Assembly increased from 24 to 44, with Malema retaining his seat as well. But in the latest elections, 2024, the EFF saw its share of the vote decline to just under 10% of the vote. These latest South African general elections were supposed to be the rise of the EFF party and Malema. Instead, we have seen the rise of the 82-year-old Zuma and his MK party, who have stolen the thunder of the younger colleague Malema and his EFF party. So one of the most contentious policies, and many agree that may have cost Malema and his EFF votes, is the open border policy for all Africans entering into South Africa. This policy is in line with his Pan-African views of One Africa. These views are rooted in policies consistent with his left-leaning communist philosophy. The issue of foreigners in South Africa remains a sensitive and touchy issue with many against the idea of a borderless South Africa. South Africans historically have complained about foreigners taking their jobs, not filling gaps, but taking their jobs. The current official unemployment rate in South Africa is around 40%. Hence the skepticism of such a policy, and it seemed people disagreed with Malema at the ballot. The problem with an economy such as South Africa to have an open border policy is that most sub-Saharan nations are underdeveloped, as in comparisons to places such as Europe, where most countries are developed to a similar or near standard. Thus, the open border policies work. People can decide to go in one country, work, come back, or vice versa. Where people are struggling, as most African countries are, they will automatically migrate into a better economy. and South Africa will be weighed down rather quickly by an influx of foreign workers into the country. So many others have called into question the focus on the continent, that is the whole of Africa, instead of focusing on South Africa first, fixing the many problems that are going on in the country rather than opening the gates or the borders of South Africa. So it seems that this has brought the EFF down, but the EFF denies this. So leave your comment below if you think this was the downfall of EFF in this particular election, the open border policy. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video.